Hi and welcome to Bible Breeze, the channel for a breath of fresh air on the pages of your Bible. We have looked at what it means that the Bible is both divine and human, and that quite often we have the tendency to maybe overemphasize the divine side and ignore the human side of the Bible that we can study. And we've talked about the story of the Bible and some of the challenges that we have when we think we know the story already, or when our story is too small. It just involves God and me and my sin, and then Jesus dying on the cross for it. And we've noticed that sometimes it is quite challenging to get out of this echo chamber where we just hear ourselves, where we expect to see and find certain things in the Bible, and that's exactly what we do find. And it's hard to leave these ruts, these well-trodden paths. That doesn't mean that we always need to find something unexpected, but to become aware of our own paradigms, to become aware of our own glasses through which we see the world and through which we approach the Bible, that can be very helpful in order for God to be able to speak to us freshly through His Spirit. One other thing that is quite important to notice are the literary genres that the Bible has. There are different styles in which the Bible has been written, and it's important to distinguish them a little bit. So we don't expect to read something, or we don't expect to find a statement in the Bible that maybe it doesn't want to make. Let me give you an example. If you go to the grocery store, there are similar items gathered in similar aisles. You might have one corridor with milk products, dairy products. You might have one with bread and buns. You might have one with soft drinks and some with veggies. And that's good so, because it helps us to orient ourselves. And if you would find something that doesn't really belong there, you might be really confused, and you might say, well, what's that doing here? Is that a dairy product? What's going on? And you stumble and you look twice. But you could also make the other mistake that you think, oh, this toothpaste here, obviously that must be some kind of chewing gum, and you just take it in and then you wonder why it is so horrible. There's another area where this happens, and that is movies. Most people enjoy and like movies, and we like our movie genres. We have our romantic comedies, romances, rom-coms, we have dramas, documentaries, horror movies, talk shows. There's the shopping channel for those of you who like that. And sometimes we are confused or we are disappointed if we kind of put on something and we think, oh, this will be a nice comedy, and then we realize, it's not so funny, what's going on? And we realize it might be a drama. Now, what would happen if you would start the TV and you would expect to see a documentary, or you think what you're watching is a documentary, but it's actually a horror movie? You would be quite shocked and very confused and very, very disturbed. Because it's a different genre, it has been made for a different purpose. And it really messes with you when you realize, that is strange. Or imagine you watch a movie that is based on true events, maybe about the Second World War, but again, you're expecting that you watch a documentary, or you're expecting to watch video camera footage. And we've talked a little bit about the challenges that we sometimes think what the Bible gives us is all video camera footage. And it's not even in the narratives. But then there are other genres, like the Psalms, that are so full of poetry and so full of emotion, where the psalmist says, oh, in my mother's womb you have woven me together, ain't I wonderfully, fearfully and wonderfully made? And now the question is that a theological statement that is true for everybody all the time? Should we make that the cornerstone of our theology? Or what does the psalmist want to express? Or when he says, I find refuge under the shadow of your wings, does this say God has wings? When Jesus says, if your hand and your eye leads you to sin, pluck out your eye, cut off your hand, should we do that literally? Or how should we understand this statement? It means something, right? So how can we discern this? And to know in which genre we are is a very, very important step. So we don't come up with very strange theology about everybody being exactly the way God wanted them to be. That could lead us very quickly to everything being exactly how God wanted it to be. And then we are with inshallah, whatever happened is what God wanted it to be. And we wonder why we should pray for his will to be done and for his kingdom to come, for example. So you notice some things are quite a bit more complex than we thought. Let's together watch a video from the Bible Project again about literary genres, and they help us to get us into give us a good introduction into what we have to deal with.
The Bible is a collection of many books, telling one unified story from beginning to end. But all those books were written in different literary styles.
Yeah, think of it like walking into a bookstore where every aisle has a different kind of literature. There's history or poetry or nonfiction. And when you choose an aisle and pick up a book, you're going to have very different expectations, different things that you're looking for.
Right, they're all literature, but they communicate in really different ways.
Yes, and so the same thing is true for the Bible. If you don't pay attention to what style it's written in, you will miss out on the brilliance of each book.
So, what are the main types of literature in the Bible?
Well, first and foremost is narrative. It makes up a whopping 43% of the Bible. After that is poetry, which is 33% of the Bible. And then there's what you could call prose discourse, which makes up the remaining 24%.
Nearly half the Bible is narrative.
Yes, and this is no accident. Stories are the most universal form of human communication. Our brains are actually hardwired to take in information through stories.
And stories are really enjoyable. Why is that?
Well, stories train us to make sense of the seemingly random events that happen in life by taking those events and then putting them in a sequence. And then together you can start to see the meaning and purpose of it all.
And what links this all together?
Well, good stories always have a character who wants something. And then through these characters, an author can explore life's big questions, like who are we, or what's really important in life. And a good story always involves some kind of conflict.
Some challenge to overcome, just like in our own lives.
And that forces us to think about our own challenges, why there's so much pain or disappointment in the world, and then what can we do about it? And stories usually end with some kind of resolution, giving us hope for our own stories.
Since these are Bible stories, are the characters showing me how I should live?
Yeah, that's not quite the point. Most Bible characters are deeply flawed. You should not be like them. But we are supposed to see ourselves in them, which helps us then see our lives and failures from a new perspective. And without even realizing it, these stories will start to mess with you and change how you see the world and other people and yourself.
Now, there are different types of narrative in the Bible.
Yeah, there's historical narrative, but also narrative parables, short biographical narratives like the four Gospels. We'll look at all these in later videos.
Okay, next up is poetry, which honestly, I don't read a lot of.
Yeah, you're like most people. But 1 out of every 3 chapters in the Bible is poetry.
Yeah, why so much poetry?
Well, poems mainly speak through dense, creative language, linking together images to help us envision the world differently. Poems use lots of metaphor to evoke your emotions and your imagination.
Lots of fancy language, but wouldn't it be easier just to tell me what I need to know?
Well, think about it. In life, we tend to form mental ruts, and we think in these familiar, well-worn paths that are very hard to get out of through logic or reasoning. And what good poetry does is force you off the familiar path into new territory.
Sneaky.
And there's different types of poetry in the Bible. There's lots of types of songs or psalms. There's the reflective poetry of the wisdom books, and then the passionate resistance poetry of the prophets.
Okay, the last big literary type is called prose discourse, and it makes up a quarter of the Bible.
Yeah, these are speeches, letters, or essays. And the focus here is building a sequence of ideas or thoughts into one linear argument that requires a logical response. Like, hey, have you thought about this thing? You should also consider how it connects to this other thing. And if you do, then you will see that this is the result. And in light of that conclusion, therefore, you should probably stop doing that one thing so that this other thing will be the outcome.
So you're persuading me with reason.
Yeah, discourse forces you to think logically and consistently and then do something about it. Biblical discourse is found in law collections, in wisdom literature, and the letters written by the apostles.
Okay, so each book of the Bible has one literary style.
No, actually, most books have a primary literary style, like narrative, for example. But then embedded in the narrative, you'll come across poems or parables or a collection of laws. Every biblical book is a unique combination of literary styles.
And to read that book well, I need to be familiar with each literary type and how it works.
Yeah, so you know what to pay attention to and what questions you should ask. But before we look at each type, there's one more unifying feature of biblical literature that's really important and really cool. And that's what we'll explore next.
Okay. Wow, I think that was quite exciting, and I love to look at the different kinds of genres that we find there. So, three main genres, narrative, poetry, and then prose discourse. Many of us are used a little bit to prose discourse. At least in Western churches, we love the letters of Paul, we love the reasoning and the arguing. But of course, we also love narratives. And one thing that Tim said in the video is that story is the basic principle of how the human mind works. And that's a quote from neurobiologist Mark Turner. And I want to give you this quote and talk a little bit about this. Mark Turner says, story is the basic principle of how the human mind works. Most of our experience, our knowledge, and our thinking is organized as stories. When children ask to hear a story, it arises out of a genuine human need to make sense of the disparate experiences of our lives. And that need is addressed in storytelling. Through stories, we learn how to see patterns, we learn about cause and effect, and we discover the consequences of our choices. Our sense of right and wrong and of what's most important, at least valuable in life, all these are shaped for us by the stories that we hear and then live. Every worldview is grounded in a fundamental narrative account of the world, something where we say this is where we come from, this is where we go. And biblical narratives are theological history. That means that their primary purpose is not moral instruction. It's not always to tell you, oh, don't cheat on your wife. That's true, but it's worldview and identity formation. Like, why should you not do this? Why does this not pay off? What are the things that really count in life? And these large-scale epic narratives address 5 ultimate questions of life, and we want to look at those. One is the question, where are we? What is real in the world? Where do we find ourselves? And again, that might sound simple, but maybe some of you have seen The Matrix, and the question, well, is this the real world? You know, what do we Christians believe? Do we believe the really important things are all spiritual, or all supernatural, and the world will fade away and we should kind of deny our bodies and focus on our souls, our bodiless souls? That will be more Plato. That's actually not the Bible, because that's what will end up in heaven someday. How do you measure your spiritual life? Is it how much time you spend in prayer? Or is it how loving you are? Or is it your ecological footprint? Where are we? What's the world? What counts? Is this table real? Or is it something that will fade away? Another question is, who are we? What is the nature and the purpose of human beings? You know, Rousseau said we are all innocent children. We should all just play in a garden, and then culture comes and culture distorts us and puts things on us, and we should just be free, and then everybody would be nice and loving. Is that true? Is that who we are? Or some religions or some cultures believe that humans were created as foods for the gods, you know, or slaves for the gods. Is this what we are? Are we only chess figures on a giant board? Are we just here to have a good time, you know, eat and drink and make the best of life? There's no higher reason. Who are we? And one of the big questions, what's actually wrong? Most cultures, I think actually all of the great religions notice that something is wrong with the world. And even other philosophies. And then the question, what is wrong, connected to the question, what is the solution? So what is our problem? Is our problem diversity? Should we all be unified? Are we only arguing because we are different nationalities, different skin colors, male and female, and the solution is to basically get rid of all these distinguishing things, and then we are one? Should we all be unified? Are we suffering from an illusion of diversity, and actually we are already one, like some of the Buddhists say, or we are all nothing, like the Zen Buddhists say? Is our problem an imbalance? Do we need more feng shui, drink more hot water or cold water and organize ourselves better? Is our problem, like Marx would have said, unequal distribution of wealth? Should we all become Robin Hood and take from the rich and give to the poor, and that will solve the problem? Do we just need to bring democracy to Iraq and that will solve the problem, because the true problem is a political one? It's the wrong form of government. What are we suffering from? And then, like I said, what is the solution? Distribute wealth, gender equality, maybe kill all infidels. That could be a solution. Or maybe you say there is no solution. Just make the best of life. Life sucks. That's almost a little bit where the postmodern answer goes. And then one other question is, what time is it? Where in the storyline are we right now? Is it 5 minutes before the rapture and everything will be burned up by fire and let's just save souls and get out of here because nothing matters anymore of this material earth? Or is it like Paul wrote in 2 Timothy, that some people are preaching that the resurrection has already happened? And sometimes you wonder, who would believe that? Well, how would that look like if the resurrection happens? Then there would be no more suffering, no more pain, everybody healed, everybody fine. So maybe some people run around and say, now that Jesus rose from the dead, everybody's healed, everybody's fine, God's kingdom reigns, hallelujah, praise the Lord, everything's great. And then others look around and say, I don't know, which world are you living in? Has that really already fully been fulfilled in our time yet? And narratives answer these questions, because we look at what happens and we wonder, well, does this add up? Does this make sense? Is this coherent? And that's a question that we need to ask with the story that we have been told. The story that our culture tells us, the modern story, was we will all get better through the use of technology and science, the hard sciences, but also the social sciences. The more we understand about sociology and psychology, the more we can fix everything, and then it will be great. And now the postmodern story is more dystopian, and you can choose between the Hunger Games and the Maze Runner, and I don't know which type of burned up world you are looking at. So stories answer these questions, and also the biblical story is the question, well, okay, what have you heard? Is the great story that God made a perfect world in order to break it and then repair it? Is that the great story? Couldn't he have made a better one from the beginning? Why is that? Why the law? All of these things. And sometimes you realize, our story might be wrong or too simple or too small. And then we talked about some of the other forms besides narrative: poetry, prose discourse. Poetry, I want to give you a nice example, a foretold story that was developed by the Bethel Bible series to help people understand the concept of literary genres and the implications for interpreting the Bible. So maybe you enjoy this as we look at the Psalms, as you look at the Psalms and other things. So we have one story that is told 4 different times. And the question is any of the ways it's told more true than the others? You remember our modern worldview. So let's have a look at this. A news report version. A great fire raged through the northeast residential area of Centerville today, taking hundreds of lives and destroying millions of dollars worth of property. A strong north wind hampered the efforts of firefighters to bring the flames under control. Tonight, hundreds of Red Cross workers converged on the charred city to bring aid to the stricken citizens. Now you could have the same message, not as a news report, but with personification. The loud voices of flames bid the winds welcome, while trees mourned and hills grimaced in pain. A remnant of the living tried valiantly to silence the mouth of the flames, but fell useless under the belching breath of the conqueror. While midst the chaos stood a band of angels, binding up the wounds of the fallen. Or we use more imagery and symbolism. Remember the garden in the days of its splendor, before the evil days came, when the sky was reddened and shrieks came up from the streets, when an enemy came upon us and joined forces with nature's breath. Ah, cursed hour, thou hast left behind the scores of open pits, each claiming its dead. Men and women are cast down in ashes. Mourners go about the streets, and red angels stretch out loving arms to lift up the fallen. And then last but not least, just the poetic form. O torturous memory of searing flames and the cries of the dying, begone and let us rest. What bleakness thou hast cast upon us, and cruel wind, why didst thou visit us in this ill-appointed hour? Why didst thou choose to heap sorrow upon sorrow? But for the angels of mercy crossed in red, we might all have gone down in pits. O torturous memory of searing flames and the cries of the dying, begone and let us rest. So 4 different versions, and the question, is any of the versions more true than the others? Does anyone distort the truth in any way? Would we end up with a wrong understanding of the event if we read the poetic form as though it were a news report? What kind of angels were there, did you say? And how does each of these different versions contribute to give us a fuller picture, not of the event, but of the meaning of the event? What did it mean for the people involved, for the nature that was involved, for creation? These are all questions that are explored through these different forms of genres, and that's why the Bible is such a rich book. Okay, so much for now. We will look in the next video at the Bible as meditation literature, which is an immensely important feature that makes the Bible a lifelong read, but also a challenging read. And I hope that you will join again to learn something. Bye-bye.